Hi sharks, welcome back. Today I thought I would try something. I have been wondering, especially since my urban sketching debacle where I came home and put some gouache over my painting, how can I take gouache out into the field and keep a nice stay wet palette without having it be cumbersome or have to have little individual cups and all sorts of things, or waste a lot of paint. And so I went online and did a search, and I was thinking, shoot, maybe I should just invent some sort of palette because I was having trouble finding anything. But then, of course, my favorite gouache artist, James Gurney, had a wonderful idea for what he does. And I don't think he's ever done a video on it, so I thought, why not share what I found? And I'm giving him credit for this. But this is what I'm going to do. I have an extra one of these Schminke palettes, and I have not used it. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this for a Stay Wet gouache palette. And here's how I'm going to do it. What I think I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take the innards out of my palette. I'm going to take this out completely and set it aside. It can be used at any time. I can put it back in this palette at any time. This doesn't have to be a permanent gouache palette, but I'm going to make it one today. So, I don't know if you're familiar with the acrylic painters Stay Wet palettes. They're these big blue, you can get them in different sizes, and mine is a mess, but they're these big blue things that are like almost like a Rubbermaid plastic. They're made by Masterson. You can get them in craft stores or you can buy them online through art stores. And what they do is they have a sponge in the bottom that you wet. It's a cellulose sponge. It stays wet for a very long time. And then you have palette paper that you lay on top of it, and it becomes damp. And it keeps your paints wet so that they're usable for days, sometimes weeks. You have to be careful though, because these sponges inside can mold. And these are what the sponges look like. They're just a cellulose sponge, very thin. Now, the problem with these sponges is that when they're dry, and I've just dampened this so that I could cut out a piece, when they're dry, they can tend to shrivel and twist up a bit, which is really a pain in the butt. But what James Gurney has done is he went to a store and bought one of those dish mat sponges. You can buy them in the dollar stores or in the grocery store. They're just like a sponge about the same size as this. I'm not sure how big this is. This looks like it's 16, or just under 16, like 11 by 16. But anyway, this is stained with paint and stuff. But anyway, you can buy those sponges in the store and then just cut one to fit. And I plan on getting one, but in the meantime, I wanted to do it with this cellulose. I'm not going to use this. I hardly ever acrylic paint, and when I do, I just do it on a glass palette. So I don't get a lot of use out of that anymore. But what I did then was I measured the inside. You want to make sure that you measure it from the inside, not the outer edge, or your stuff won't fit. But the inside, I measured it on both sides, and then I cut out a piece of sponge to fit like this. Here's mine. This is one of these sponges that I was talking about. This one's had its share of use and it's gone through the wash so many times. I have a few of them. But when I'm washing just a few dishes, I'll just put them right on this and set them out to dry. But in between here is a little bit of a sponge, and he uses this cut out into the same shape, and uses this instead, and he says it stays wet just as long, although mine dries pretty darn quick. And anyway, he uses that. I'm going to use my cellulose sponge because that's what I have at this point. I'm not going to cut this up because I use them. In fact, this one's dirty, I see, so I'm going to have to change it out and put a new one out. But anyway, that's what James Gurney uses, is this stuff. And you can get them right in your dollar store. And as you can see, I did the paper as well. Now, hopefully these will fit in here. This is just damp, and I dampened it so that I would have it at its largest state, because when they dry, they do tend to shrink and shrivel and twist. So I'm going to go ahead and lay it down inside the palette. Looks like it fits in perfectly. And then I can put my palette paper on top. I thought I had 2 sheets, but I guess I only cut 1 sheet. So I'm going to set that on top, and it looks like this one is a little hair too big. So I'll probably have to cut it down. Oh no, it goes in there fairly well. Okay, perfect. So now I'd need to have my sponge a little bit wetter. But then what you do is you take your paints. I probably would take them along with me. But then I would go ahead and lay my paints down inside the palette and do my mixing on the outer edges of the palette, just like you would expect to do, right? So I'm going to go ahead and set this up like I'm out plein air painting or urban sketching, and I'm going to go ahead and do a quick gouache painting today, and I'm going to use this palette here and see how it works. Okay, now I'm just going to get my colors together that I need. I think I'll go with this primary red. It is more pink. Darn it. It always crackles from the edges there, and I get it on my palette then. Okay, so here's my finished quick gouache painting. I had my gouache a little bit on the dry side, so it was causing me some issues. Gotta get used to that. But this palette works out very well. I'm really pleased with it. Now I'm going to close it and see if it stays wet and for how long, because I've got quite a bit of paint in here. I may give it a squirt, maybe even under the paper, just to wet my sponge a little more. I don't want the sponge too wet though, or I'll end up with mold. Right now it feels pretty wet, but I'll just add a little bit of water to it so that it stays damp, and we'll see how it works. If it doesn't work, I will let you know. I'll let you know either way. There. Okay, so that's it. Seal it up. The only thing I'm concerned about, other than it drying out, is that over time it's going to rust my palette, because those palettes are not meant to be wet all the time. So we'll see what happens. But I didn't want to use Tupperware because I felt like Tupperware was going to have too much airspace, you know, between the lid and the body of the bowl or whatever. Now, granted, that one's pretty deep and you can get shallow ones. I have shallow ones, but I just thought trying this might be a really good idea, and it's got the ring hole, so it's easy to hold while I'm painting. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. Anyway, everybody have a terrific day. Be courageous, paint with wild abandon, and most of all, be kind to each other. God bless you. Bye-bye.